Once upon a time, in the heart of a bustling and affluent city where skyscrapers kissed the clouds and life moved at an electrifying pace, there lived a man named Eric. Eric was not just any man, he was a billionaire, a figure whose name was synonymous with success, wealth, and prestige. His empire stretched far and wide, touching industries from technology to real estate, and his every move made headlines. Eric's mansion, perched on the highest hill overlooking the city, was the epitome of luxury. Its towering marble pillars, sprawling gardens, and sparkling infinity pools were sights to behold. Inside, every room glistened with opulence, chandeliers dripped with crystals, rare artworks adorned the walls, and the scent of the finest imported perfumes lingered in the air. To the world, Eric's life seemed perfect, a dream few could ever hope to attain. Yet behind the gilded doors of his palace, Eric's heart was heavy with a loneliness that no amount of wealth could alleviate. He had everything money could buy, but the one thing he truly desired remained elusive: genuine love, a love untainted by greed or ulterior motives. Eric had tried to fill the void with countless relationships, lavish dates, extravagant gifts, and romantic getaways. All failed to bring him closer to the connection he craved. Each relationship ended the same way, leaving Eric disheartened and more cynical than before. The women he met often saw only the billionaire, not the man beneath the tailored suits and designer watches. They were drawn to his money, his status, his power, but never to Eric himself. One fateful evening, as Eric sat alone in the grand dining hall of his mansion, the echo of his own footsteps his only company, he came to a realization. Perhaps, he thought, the only way to find someone who truly sees me is to leave this world behind. With that thought, an audacious plan began to take shape in his mind. He would leave behind his life of luxury, his mansion, his cars, his servants, and live as an ordinary man. Not just an ordinary man, but one who had nothing to offer but himself. He would go undercover as a beggar, shedding every trace of his wealth and status. Disguised in tattered clothes and a scruffy appearance, he would walk the streets, blending into the background of a world far removed from his own. Eric hoped that in this new guise he would meet someone who would see him for who he truly was, a kind-hearted, intelligent, and compassionate man. Someone who would look past the grime and see the soul beneath. It was a risky gamble, but Eric was resolute. For the first time in years, his heart felt a flicker of excitement, a sense of purpose. As he packed a simple bag with a few essentials and donned his disguise, he took one last look at the grandeur surrounding him. Goodbye, he whispered to the life he had known. With nothing but determination in his heart, Eric stepped out into the night, ready to begin a journey that would test not only his resolve, but the very essence of what it meant to love and be loved. Little did he know, his quest would lead him to places he never imagined, and to a woman who would change his life in ways he could never foresee. Eric's decision to leave his life of luxury was not one he took lightly. It required careful planning and, above all, the courage to face the unknown. He began by confiding in the two people who had been with him through every chapter of his life: his parents. His mother, Eleanor, was a graceful and loving woman whose presence could light up any room. Her heart ached as Eric revealed his plan, the creases in her brow deepening with worry. "Eric, this is madness," she said, her voice trembling as she reached out to hold his hand. "You've built a life that most people can only dream of, and now you want to throw it all away. What if someone recognizes you? What if you're hurt?" Eric met her gaze with determination. "Mother, I've tried everything. I've lived this life to its fullest, and yet something is missing. I need to know if love, real love, is out there for me. The kind that doesn't see money or power, just me." His father, Robert, a stern and pragmatic politician who valued security above all, paced the room, his jaw set in frustration. "Son, do you realize how dangerous this is? You could be kidnapped or worse. People won't see Eric, the man. They'll see an opportunity. Think about what you're risking." Eric stood firm, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside him. "I've thought about this, Father. I'll go somewhere far, somewhere no one knows me. This isn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It's something I have to do." Eleanor's eyes welled with tears as she clutched her son's hands tightly. "Promise me, Eric. Promise me you'll be careful." "I promise, Mother," Eric said, his voice soft yet resolute. "I'll come back when I've found what I'm looking for." With heavy hearts, his parents watched as Eric packed a single duffel bag, leaving behind the comforts of his lavish home. The mansion that had once been his sanctuary now felt like a gilded cage. Eric traveled far from the city, choosing a small, remote village where the rhythm of life was slow and his billionaire identity would be unknown. Upon arrival, he visited a local thrift store, purchasing tattered clothes that hung loosely on his frame. To complete his disguise, he found an old, rickety wheelchair, an item he hoped would make him appear more vulnerable and unassuming. For the first time in his life, Eric sat on a quiet street corner, humbled by his new reality. The once powerful man whose signature had moved millions and whose presence had commanded rooms now sat with his head bowed and his hand extended. "Please, help me," he whispered to passers-by, his voice trembling with unfamiliar vulnerability. The world seemed to pass him by, indifferent and hurried. Some glanced at him with pity, while others avoided eye contact entirely, as if acknowledging him might burden their conscience. The weight of being invisible bore down on him, a stark contrast to the life he had known. At first, it stung. Eric had always been surrounded by attention, whether genuine or calculated, and now he was just another face in the crowd. But as the days passed, he began to see the world through a different lens. He noticed the kindness of strangers who offered him small coins, the struggles etched on the faces of others in the village, and the fleeting moments of humanity that often went unnoticed. For the first time, Eric felt connected to something deeper than himself. This new life was uncomfortable and raw, yet it was also strangely liberating. He wasn't a billionaire here. He wasn't an icon or a symbol of success. He was just Eric, a man in search of truth. Little did he know, the truth he sought was closer than he could imagine, and his journey had only just begun. Days in the village blended into one another, a monotonous routine of solitude and survival for Eric. The bustling streets of the city, where he once commanded attention, now seemed like a distant memory. In this quiet corner of the world, he had become invisible, a man without a past, blending into the background of daily life. Villagers hurried past him, their lives consumed by their own struggles. Most barely glanced in his direction, and those who did offered only fleeting pity before moving on. Each day was marked by silence, each night by cold, restless sleep on the hard ground. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting golden hues across the village, a young woman named Destiny walked through the square. She carried a basket of fresh produce from the market, her steps unhurried and her demeanor warm. Destiny was known in the village for her compassionate nature and her willingness to help anyone in need. As she approached the corner where Eric sat, something made her pause. Her kind brown eyes fell on him, his unkempt appearance, the threadbare clothes, and the weathered wheelchair. Unlike the others, she didn't look away. Instead, she stopped in her tracks. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice soft and sincere. Eric looked up, startled. It had been days since anyone had spoken to him, let alone with such kindness. For a moment, he struggled to find his voice. "I'm just trying to get by," he murmured, his words tinged with both gratitude and embarrassment. Destiny set down her basket and reached into her small purse. She pulled out a few coins and handed them to him. "It's not much, but I hope it helps," she said, her smile warm and genuine. Eric's heart swelled with gratitude. It wasn't the money that moved him. It was the fact that she saw him, really saw him. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice almost breaking. "You don't know how much this means to me." Destiny hesitated for a moment, her eyes searching his face. "Do you have a place to stay?" she asked gently. Eric shook his head, lowering his gaze. "Number I've been figuring it out day by day." Her expression softened further, a flicker of determination igniting within her. "Wait here," she said. "I'll be back." That evening, as the sun disappeared behind the hills and the first stars began to twinkle in the sky, Destiny sat at the wooden table in her family's small but cozy farmhouse. Across from her sat her father, Roland, a rugged man with calloused hands and a kind heart. He had spent his life working the land, providing for his family, and helping those he could. "Father," Destiny began, her voice earnest, "I met a man in the village today. He's in a wheelchair and has nowhere to go. He looks like he's been through a lot." Roland set down his fork, his brow furrowed. "A man in a wheelchair, you say?" "Yes," Destiny replied. "He doesn't seem like the others. There's something different about him. He's kind and polite, but he's clearly struggling. I can't just leave him out there." Roland sighed deeply, leaning back in his chair. He had always taught his children to help others, but taking in a stranger wasn't a decision to be made lightly. Still, he trusted his daughter's judgment. "Bring him here," Roland said after a long pause. "No one should be left alone to suffer, especially not in our village." A smile spread across Destiny's face. "Thank you, Father. I'll go back first thing in the morning." That night, Eric sat alone under the stars, his mind replaying his brief encounter with Destiny. Her kindness had touched him in a way he hadn't felt in years. For the first time since leaving his old life, he felt a glimmer of hope. Little did he know, Destiny and her family would not only offer him shelter, but would also become the key to discovering the love and humanity he had longed for. Eric's arrival at Roland and Destiny's home was met with quiet acceptance. Their farmhouse was modest, with creaking wooden floors and the faint aroma of baked bread lingering in the air, but it radiated a warmth and love that Eric had never encountered in his mansion. Destiny showed him to a small room at the back of the house, its walls adorned with faded wallpaper and a single window overlooking the fields. "This is your space now," she said with a gentle smile. "It's not much, but you're welcome to stay as long as you need." Eric was overwhelmed by their generosity. "Thank you," he said sincerely, his voice almost catching. "This means more than I can say." From that day on, Eric's life took on a rhythm that was both foreign and comforting. In the mornings he joined Roland in the garden, learning to plant vegetables and tend to the soil. His once soft hands grew rough from the work, but with every shovel of dirt, he felt a sense of purpose that had long eluded him. At mealtimes, Destiny prepared simple but hearty dishes, and they would sit together around the wooden table, sharing stories and laughter. Destiny's laughter, in particular, was infectious, filling the room with a joy that made Eric's chest tighten in a way he couldn't quite explain. One day, Destiny handed Eric a basket of apples and suggested they bake a pie together. The kitchen quickly became filled with the sounds of laughter as Eric clumsily rolled out dough under Destiny's amused gaze. Flour dusted his shirt, and for the first time in years, Eric found himself laughing, truly laughing. The days turned into weeks, and Eric began to realize that he was experiencing life in a way he never had before. He wasn't just existing, he was living. The simplicity of this new life brought him a peace that all the wealth in the world had failed to provide. But as his bond with Destiny and Roland deepened, so did his guilt. He had grown fond of them, and the thought of betraying their trust weighed heavily on him. They had taken him in, cared for him, and treated him like family, all without knowing who he truly was. One evening, the three of them sat outside in the garden, the night sky above them shimmering with stars. Fireflies danced in the air, their soft glow adding to the magic of the moment. Destiny leaned back in her chair, gazing up at the heavens, before turning her attention to Eric. "You seem sad sometimes," she said softly, her voice carrying an unspoken concern. "Is there something you're not telling us?" Eric's heart raced. He stared at the ground, unable to meet her gaze. "I'm just grateful to be here," he replied after a pause, his voice barely above a whisper. Destiny studied him for a moment, her expression gentle but probing. "You don't have to carry everything on your own, you know," she said. "Whatever it is, you can talk to us. We're here for you." Eric swallowed hard, his chest tightening with emotion. He wanted to tell her everything: who he was, why he had come to the village, and the truth about his wealth. But fear held him back. What if they saw him differently? What if they no longer trusted him? "Thank you," he said finally, his voice thick with emotion. "That means a lot." Destiny reached out and placed a comforting hand on his. "It's what family does," she said with a smile, and Eric's heart ached at the word. As the night deepened and they sat in comfortable silence under the canopy of stars, Eric realized that he had found something far more valuable than he had ever imagined. A connection built on kindness, trust, and love. But he also knew that the truth couldn't stay hidden forever, and the thought of that looming revelation filled him with both dread and hope. Eric had grown so deeply attached to Roland and Destiny that he considered them family. They had given him more than shelter and food. They had given him a sense of belonging, the love and connection he had sought for so long. Yet the burden of his secret loomed ever larger, and Eric knew it was only a matter of time before it came to light. One crisp morning, as Eric sat at the breakfast table sipping tea, Roland approached with a rare smile on his face. His weathered hands held a folded document, and his voice carried a note of triumph. "Eric," Roland began, setting the paper down on the table, "I have good news. I sold a portion of my family's land to raise money for your surgery. Soon we can get you the help you need to walk again." The words hit Eric like a blow. His breath caught in his throat, and his hands shook as he stared at the paper. "You sold your land for me," he whispered, disbelief and guilt lacing his words. "What's land compared to a life?" Roland replied warmly. "You're part of this family now. We couldn't just sit by and do nothing." Eric felt the weight of their sacrifice crash down on him. His eyes burned with unshed tears as he wrestled with the truth. He could no longer keep up the lie. It would only deepen the betrayal. Summoning his courage, he decided to reveal everything. "Roland," Eric began, his voice trembling, "I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you from the start." Roland's expression shifted slightly, concern flickering in his eyes. Destiny entered the room, drawn by the gravity in Eric's tone. "I'm not who you think I am," Eric confessed. "I'm not a beggar, I'm a billionaire." He paused, looking between Roland and Destiny, whose faces were frozen in disbelief. "I came here to find love, real love. I disguised myself to see if someone could care for me without knowing who I really am." The room fell silent, the air thick with tension. Roland's face darkened as the truth sank in. His eyes, once filled with warmth, now brimmed with disappointment. Without a word, he stood and walked out of the room, the sound of the screen door slamming behind him echoing like a final judgment. Destiny, still seated, stared at Eric with tears welling in her eyes. "You lied to us," she said, her voice quivering with a mix of hurt and anger. "We gave you everything we had, our trust, our home, our love. How could you?" Eric's heart broke as he saw the pain in her eyes. "Destiny, I never meant to hurt you," he pleaded. "You've been so kind, so selfless. You and your father showed me what it means to truly care for someone. I didn't expect to feel this way, to care this much about you both." Destiny stood, wiping away a tear. "You think that makes it better?" she snapped. "We trusted you, Eric, and now I find out that everything we shared was built on a lie." Eric reached out to her, desperation in his voice. "Please, Destiny, I'll make it right. I'll buy back the land. I'll give you anything you need. I never wanted this to happen." She stepped back, shaking her head. "It's not about the money, Eric. It never was. It's about trust, and you shattered it." Eric was left standing in the empty kitchen, the weight of his actions suffocating him. Roland's absence and Destiny's tears haunted him. The love and connection he had found were slipping away, all because of his deception. As the sun set over the fields that evening, Eric sat alone on the porch, staring out at the horizon. For the first time, he realized that wealth could fix a broken roof, but it couldn't mend a broken heart. He had gambled everything to find love, but now he was losing the very people who had shown him what it truly meant. And as the stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky, Eric vowed to do whatever it took to earn their forgiveness, if only they would give him a chance. The betrayal had left scars, but Eric was determined to earn back the trust of the people who had become his family. He refused to leave the village, choosing instead to face the consequences of his actions head-on. Every morning, as the first rays of sunlight spilled over the fields, Eric rose early and worked tirelessly on Roland's land. He repaired fences, tilled the soil, and replanted crops, often under the blistering sun. His once soft hands became calloused, his body sore from the relentless labor. It wasn't just about restoring the land. Eric saw it as a way to rebuild the bridge he had burned. He poured his guilt, his regret, and his hope into every task, determined to prove that his remorse was genuine. But it wasn't just the land he focused on. He turned his attention to Destiny, whose kindness and dreams had inspired him from the start. One afternoon he approached her as she sat on the porch, sketching plans in a worn notebook. "I heard you talk about starting a market," Eric said hesitantly, holding out a bundle of supplies he had purchased with the little money he had left. "I thought maybe this could help get you started." Destiny looked up, surprised, her eyes scanning the items, seeds, small tools, and a few jars of preserves. She hesitated, her fingers brushing over the supplies. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice tinged with both curiosity and guardedness. "Because you believed in me when no one else did," Eric said softly. "Because I want to see you succeed. You gave me a chance to start over. Let me do the same for you." Though she didn't say it, Destiny's heart stirred. She saw something in Eric's eyes that hadn't been there before: humility and a deep, genuine care. As weeks turned into months, Eric continued to prove his sincerity through his actions. He worked alongside Roland, helped Destiny organize her plans for the market, and became a quiet but steady presence in their lives. The villagers too began to notice his efforts, their initial skepticism giving way to cautious acceptance. One evening, as the harvest moon rose high in the sky, casting a golden glow over the fields, Roland and Eric sat by the fire. The crackling flames cast flickering shadows on Roland's weathered face as he turned to Eric. "You made a mistake," Roland began, his tone even but firm. "A big one. But what matters isn't the mistake. It's what you do after. You've shown me that you're willing to make things right, and that takes more courage than you might realize. Eric's chest tightened as he nodded, unable to find the words to express his gratitude. Roland continued, his voice softening. I'll admit, I was angry. I thought you were just another man who didn't understand what it means to truly struggle, but you've shown me that you're more than that. You've earned my respect. The words struck a chord deep within Eric, and for the first time in months he felt a flicker of hope. Destiny, too, began to see the changes in Eric. Though her heart had been deeply wounded, she couldn't ignore the transformation in him. One evening, as they worked together to organize jars and baskets for the new market, she paused, glancing at him out of the corner of her eye. "You've changed," she said quietly, her voice carrying a mix of surprise and admiration. Eric looked at her, his hands stilling. "I had to," he admitted. "I hurt the two people who mean the most to me. I don't want to be the man I was. I want to be someone worthy of your trust." Destiny's gaze lingered on him, and though she didn't respond, her silence wasn't one of rejection. Instead, it spoke of a heart slowly mending, a trust cautiously beginning to rebuild itself. The grand opening of Destiny's market became a celebration for the entire village. Stalls were filled with fresh produce, handmade goods, and smiling faces. Destiny stood at the entrance, greeting each visitor with her radiant smile. Eric stayed in the background, content to watch her shine. As the evening drew to a close, Destiny found Eric sitting on a bench near the edge of the market, gazing at the stars. She approached quietly and sat beside him. "I didn't think we'd get here," she admitted, her voice soft. Eric turned to her, his expression filled with gratitude. "Neither did I, but I'm glad we did." Destiny looked at him for a long moment, her eyes reflecting the light of the stars. "You hurt us," she said finally, her voice steady. "But you also showed us that you're willing to change, to do better. And that means something." Eric's heart swelled with hope. "Does that mean you might be able to forgive me?" Destiny smiled faintly, the corners of her lips lifting just enough to soften her words. "I think I already have." For the first time in what felt like forever, Eric felt truly at peace. Though the road to redemption had been long and painful, it had brought him to a place he had never thought possible, a place of love, forgiveness, and hope. And as the two of them sat beneath the endless sky, Eric realized that he had finally found what he had been searching for all along. Months had passed since the betrayal, but the wounds had healed, leaving behind scars that spoke of resilience and forgiveness. The small village had become a place of renewal, not only for Eric, but for everyone who had come to know his story. The quiet whispers of mistrust had turned into warm greetings, and the once aloof villagers now embraced him as one of their own. On a balmy summer evening, the village square was transformed into a scene of celebration. Lanterns hung from every tree and beam, casting a golden glow that mirrored the joy in the hearts of everyone present. Long tables were adorned with wildflowers and simple homemade dishes, and the air buzzed with laughter and music. At the center of it all stood Eric and Destiny, hand in hand. Eric wore a simple suit, a far cry from the tailored designer outfits of his past, but it suited him perfectly. Destiny, radiant in a flowing white dress adorned with delicate lace, held a bouquet of wildflowers. Her smile lit up the evening, her eyes reflecting a deep love that had grown stronger through every trial they had faced together. The villagers gathered around as the ceremony began. Roland, standing proudly at Destiny's side, looked on with a smile of quiet approval. He had come to see Eric not as the man he once was, but as the man he had become, a man worthy of his daughter's heart. As the officiant spoke, the couple exchanged vows, their voices steady and filled with emotion. "I vow to always be honest," Eric said, his eyes locked on Destiny's, to cherish the love we've built and to honor the kindness and forgiveness you've shown me. You've taught me that true wealth is found in the hearts we touch, and I promise to never take that for granted. Destiny's voice trembled slightly, her smile soft and radiant. I vow to walk beside you through every challenge and joy. You've shown me the strength it takes to change and the beauty of a heart willing to grow. Together, we've built something unshakable, and I promise to nurture it every day of our lives. The crowd erupted into cheers as Eric and Destiny sealed their vows with a kiss under the warm glow of the lanterns. Fireflies danced in the air as if nature itself celebrated their union. As the festivities began, the villagers toasted to the couple's future, their glasses raised high. Eric and Destiny moved through the crowd, sharing laughter, gratitude, and heartfelt embraces. It wasn't just a wedding, it was a testament to the power of love, forgiveness, and second chances. Later that evening, as the music softened and the stars emerged in full brilliance, Eric and Destiny stole a quiet moment beneath an ancient oak tree at the edge of the square. The sounds of laughter and music faded into the background as they gazed at each other, the weight of the journey they had taken together evident in their shared silence. "I never thought I'd find this," Eric admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "A love like this, a life like this." Destiny reached for his hand, intertwining her fingers with his. "Neither did I," she said softly. "But sometimes life surprises us in the best ways." As they stood there, the village celebrating behind them, Eric felt a sense of peace he had never known. He realized that the path he had taken, with all its missteps and heartache, had led him exactly where he was meant to be. And so, Eric discovered that true love is not measured by wealth, but by the kindness and compassion shared between hearts. Destiny taught him the power of forgiveness, and together they built a life filled with joy and purpose. Their love became a beacon, not just for them, but for all who witnessed it. A reminder that even the most broken paths can lead to the most beautiful destinations. As the lanterns swayed gently in the night breeze and the stars looked down on the village, Eric and Destiny began their new life together, ready to face the future hand in hand. For them, this was not the end of a story, but the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with love, hope, and endless possibilities.